So last year we had Safety Week, and this year we have Safety Day, which was yesterday. And even though I'm late in submitting my idea, I want to share with you some safe usage and tips on the sliding compound mitre saw, which is one of my favourite power tools. Later on in this video, I'd like to try and share with you a brief story on an accident I had a few years ago with a different machine, and also another issue that came up recently at work this week. So to start off with, I'm going to look at a simple cross-cutting operation at 90 degrees. So I've got a board here I want to use. I'm going to cut this end off so it's nice and clean. You see it's damaged on the end there. The first thing I want to look for is a nice straight edge to go against the fence. Sometimes when you work with sawn boards that have not been planed, you'll find the edges can be concave or convex. Ideally you want the convex edge, like this, against the fence. So if we use these two sticks here as an exaggeration of a curved edge of a board, as you bring the blade down, finish through the cut, the teeth are still spinning in this direction towards the fence, and as each half is freed there'll be a tendency for the teeth to catch it and throw it back towards the fence, causing it to pinch on the blade, which can result in the blade being kicked up back at you. Of course it's fixed to the machine, it's not going to come out or anything, but it can be quite a scary experience, and if your hands are too close, for example, you might flinch, you might jump, and if part of that blade is to explode, you could risk an injury there. What I'll show you now is a brief video clip I shot from a previous project, and that shows where I was aware that the blade was binding in the cut of I was cutting a big walnut board about this wide, and you'll see as I'm bringing the saw down to complete the cut to the full depth, it's kind of pinching. As I bring it up slowly it kind of snatches at me. But because one thing I like about sliding mitre saws over radial arm saws is, on a radial arm saw you're pulling towards you at the level with the bed, and there's no way to lift this up easily. So if the blade does bind or snatch in a radial arm saw, it's only going to go in one direction, that's towards you. Now in a mitre saw, if it snatches and you let go of the handle, automatically retracts and the guard kicks in to protect you. So although some people say these are much more dangerous than radial arm saws, I actually disagree with that. There's a similar issue when you're cutting a board that's bowed along its length. So if it's like this, for example, once those two halves are separated, it's going to fall down onto the blade. You're going to get a bang and a bit of a kickback as well, maybe. The same principle as ripping on a table saw. Always work with the convex edge down if you don't have a flat face. And wherever possible, I would always advise you to use the supplied clamp that comes with your saw. Just like this, especially on a thick workpiece or something maybe quite short where your hand would otherwise be quite close to the blade. I do this a lot with angle cuts because setting the blade at a 45-degree angle can mean that the angle here between the blade, the fence and your hand or the clamp is quite acute, and there's an increased risk there of some kind of injury perhaps. And you'll also notice that I have the zero clearance fence fitted here. It's the full length, supporting long lengths of timber. And I can also fit a couple of stops on the end for repeat cutting to length. One of the reasons I also have this is for a zero clearance at the back, and that gives a clean cut when I've got a board here, so I don't get any breakout on this back edge here. There is another reason, which I consider to be an important safety reason, and if I remove the fence I'll be able to explain that better. If we now look at the saw with the fence removed, you can see I've put masking tape on here to kind of shim it so it's nice and square, but more importantly there's a larger gap around the blade aperture now, and this is obviously to accommodate 45-degree angles. Let me swing on quickly. And of course bevel cuts as well. But the danger here for me is that when you're cutting, doing a lot of cuts, maybe you're working on site somewhere, you haven't got time to clear it up properly, these tend to build up behind the blade here, and the more cuts you create, the more of an obstruction they become. And as it builds up, there's a tendency for the cut from an end of a board, like this say, come up here to shoot back from the blade and to bind against the others, causing a bit of a kickback, a bit of a bang. It might even damage the end of the workpiece. But it can be quite dangerous having this build up of offcuts and junk basically. And having a full length zero clearance fence is one way to prevent that. In my home workshop I also try to use dust extraction on this saw, but as you can see from the area surrounding, it's not very efficient, to be honest. I would like to kind of box this area in behind, as many woodworkers have done on YouTube, but in my limited space that would then have an effect on the wood storage shelves behind. I have to get rid of those, or at least reduce their width somewhat. And that's the main reason I haven't done this. But also on this saw, there's a tilt locking lever behind, and I need good access to that really. So we've already looked over some of the mere basics of using this saw. One thing you won't have seen in my video earlier is that as I bring this saw down and put it towards me, the motion is actually quite stiff. These bars guiding the blade forwards and backwards are in need of some kind of lubrication. I do try to oil them regularly with a PTFE spray, but I think it's inside the saw, underneath where I can't get to. That's where the kind of gunk is built up. I need to get inside and clean that. In fact, one of the most popular referrals to my blog is from people asking questions about how to maintain this saw, how to strip it apart, how to get inside and clean these rails. So I'm going to try and show you that now. It's actually quite simple. But the first thing you want to do, disconnect the power. Now looking underneath the knob at the front of the saw here, what I want to do is to try and get these bars out at the back. So if I pull it forwards again, you can see there's a black bar here with two bolts on there. I think they're M6s. I'm using a 10mm spanner to remove them first of all. And the bar comes away. Now I swung my saw station around for better access, and this whole assembly should now slide out the back. I'll be careful not to lose this bushing on the end here. I'm going to put this down on the bench and begin looking at it. Looking more closely, you can see some build-ups just here. That's quite tricky to remove my fingernail. And also at the back here, it's quite gummed up. So I'm going to get some white spirit and the rag, and I'll clean it off first of all before doing anything else. So I've turned the saw over onto its flat side with the angled motor housing on top, so it sits more firmly on the table. And I'm going to brush away most of the loose stuff as I can. I can't find my smaller brush at the minute. I do have some toothbrush-sized brass ones, which are great for this. I just can't find them. So it's have to do for now. I have to clean it with white spirit and an old sock for a rag. A bit more on there actually. No, hopefully that'll do. That seems to work quite well actually. So I'm going to clean the bushing as well in the same way. And also the bar removed from the front of the saw. Just around the back of the saw, the two rails go into these slots here, and inside you've got these fine ball bearings. You can just hear them there on my finger. If you can get something in to clean that as well, it's a good idea. It probably has a tool or a brush available that would be better to do this. But again, I'm going to use my old sock. And so now, having removed the excess white spirit with the paper towel, it's already feeling much smoother than before. And before I reinsert these bars, I want to lubricate them. But what I'm going to use now is T9 Bow Shield. I've had it for a while. It's just a spray. You can spray lubricant, and as long as you wipe away the excess, it works quite well. So I'll spray an even coat on each bar, take another paper towel and try to work it in and leaving a dry surface. Just going to reinstall that ring before I slide the saw back into place. So that's sliding quite nicely for me now. I quite like this. That's all I've really got to do, is to reinstall the bar we removed earlier. Now, another popular referral to my blog comes when people ask about changing the blade on this saw. And first to do that, I'm going to bring the saw forwards, lock it in place. I'm also going to lock the head in place, so I can't bring it down. I'm going to start removing this bolt here with a 13mm spanner. The guide swings round. I'll loosen this screw a bit more. Take the whole thing off. Again, I use a 13mm spanner to remove the blade nuts, but to hold the blade steady there's a spindle lock over on this side. So engage that. On this saw you turn the spanner clockwise to release it. There's a bolt with a washer, a flange washer, and off comes the blade. This blade here actually needs to go away for sharpening, but I'll put it here for now. Now, I was always taught that it was important to use a blade with a negative rake angle when using a mitre saw or a radial arm saw. But on this blade here you can see it has a positive rake angle. Even though I bought this blade specifically for this saw because it was the one Freud recommended on their website. We take the old blade I was using last time from Atkinson Walker. You can just see the angle is different and the tips of the blade bevel off at 5 degrees that way. The disadvantage of using a positive rake blade is that the blade will always be trying to pull its way through the timber, and particularly at the end of the cut there's going to be a tendency for the blade to want to lift the back of the board near the fence. Blades with a positive rake angle are usually reserved for table saws, rip saws, circular saws, those kind of things. If you want to, you can clean the saw at this point. Any debris and dirt around the arbor can affect the fitting of the blade. I'm going to put some gloves on because mine is quite clean. I'm going to go ahead with a sharp blade and just carefully install it. Just try not to damage the teeth here. Just carefully slip it into place over the arbor, like so. Take that flange washer, fits in like so, and the locking nut, which goes on anti-clockwise with a left-hand thread. And again, engage the spindle lock just to tighten this up, just to make sure. Spinning it by hand to check that it's running true, it's seating correctly, and that looks good. Now I put the blade guard back on. Sits about there. Try and lock that in place. And the screw there. It's not really enough. Just double check a few times. Bring the saw down, we've unlocked it. Just before I reinstall my fence, I want to make a quick cross cut, check all is okay. At the start of this video I mentioned that I had an accident here a few years ago. And that was actually on a machine very similar to this one. It was actually a 10-inch wide machine, this is a 6-inch machine. And what I was doing was sanding away some of the rust that was on the surface here, because the roof used to leak quite badly, and it still does in places, but I'm more aware of it now. Anyway, I was sanding away with a bit of WD-40, some sandpaper, but no protection to my hands. And as I was going around, I went across to here, with no protection, no gloves. A part of the blade was exposed at the level of the table. I wasn't really very careful, and I ended up slicing my right thumb along the blade, only for a fraction of a second, but the pain was instant. I felt it straight away. I pulled my hand away and the blood began pouring out. There's a very slight scar here you cannot see on the camera, but it was quite a panicking situation. The pain was really intense and the blood it wouldn't stop. I can't stress that enough. I have a first aid kit here in the workshop that I was able to use to badge it up, and gradually after about 2 weeks it eventually healed. But that first night, the first 24 hours in fact, the throbbing, the pain, it was so intense. I've never known anything like it before. I've had plenty of splinters, plenty of minor cuts with hand tools, but to actually go quite deep with a machine in a stationary position as well, it's something I'll never forget. And ever since then I've been very proficient to wear a thick pair of gloves whenever really I'm handling anything on the machine without a guard, anything on the planing machine anyway. I always wear it when I'm changing the knives, changing the blades, but on this one occasion I was being sloppy. I didn't really think fully of the consequences, and well, I paid for them, I guess. I still have my thumb, that is one positive thing. There was no infection, it cleaned up fairly well. So that's my confession, if you will. And there is one other safety issue that cropped up 2 days ago, on safety day itself actually. This is then my day job, where I make packing cases for a living. Well, I was using it's called a hammer chisel. It's an air power tool, runs off a compressor line, and you basically have a bit on the end that jumps backwards and forwards. We use it to fold over the ends of tubular rivets to hold on catches and those kind of things. So I'm pounding the tool down, I'm holding it against the rivet, and that's pounding down against the metal plate to fold it over. and this creates quite a lot of vibration. And what I've noticed is that my right thumb, from about here all the way down to here, is now numb. Now that in my left hand, that feels very cold. I can't. That is cold. There's no feeling there. It's numb. It's okay on the tip, but right down there it's numb, and it's also a little bit paler than the rest. Now, this happened to me once before. I never really thought anything of it. It's only because another guy I work with earlier in the week found that one of his fingers, this one here, was completely white, and that was very cold as well. He went to see his doctor, and he advised him that he has something known as vibration white finger. That is also known as hand-arm vibration syndrome. If you've not heard of it, then I'm not surprised. It seems to be quite unknown in the woodworking world. But it is something we were told about briefly at college a few years ago. But I never honestly thought it would be something that would affect me. But you think about it, belt sanders, all kinds of sanding machines, routers, they all generate vibration. If you're using them day in, day out for prolonged periods, you are going to be at risk. I'm hoping now that the company I work for are actually going to do something about this. All they've really done so far is offer us a pair of gloves to wear, and that's not brilliant. Even the doctor said that's not an end to the solution. The risk here is that it's an issue that may not go away. And once you get it, you're very lucky if it does go away, and it can lead to trouble later on with a loss of feeling, obviously, and even when the blood does return to your finger, you can find the experience quite painful as it warms up again, and you can get issues with nerves and muscles as well. So it's something that's worth being aware of if you've not seen it before. But again, it depends on what you do for a living, what you do in your spare time, and how much you're using these tools. But if you ever notice any sort of tingling sensations, numbness, cold, then maybe you should stop what you're doing and think, why is this happening to me? Should I see my doctor? Should I carry on doing this or not? Thank you for watching my video on Safety Day this year, even though it is already 2 days late. I do try and take health and safety issues fairly seriously in my workshop, but by my own admission, I am human and I'm not perfect, as we all are. So, I hope you've learned something from this video, and there's something positive you can take away. And please like and subscribe. I'll be back very soon with some proper videos on woodworking projects and more. Thank you.